What is going on, Nuggets Nation, NBA fans? My name is Tom Leuthner. Welcome back to Nuggets Today, presented by Fan Arch. We have some topics to cover, obviously. The first thing that I want to hop into here is the fact that inside sources believe that Cam Payne is officially not going back to the New York Knicks, and Denver is still working out that last roster spot. We did see them bring in Moses Brown for a training camp deal. We did see them bring in Kessler Edwards rather, for a training camp deal. But there's no solidified backup point guard. Now, the Knicks brought in obviously Jordan Clarkson. They brought back Shamit. They were able to get Brogdon on a one-year deal, and Denver is still very weak with their backup point guard slot. So I wouldn't mind sort of letting Cam Payne come in and attempt to fight out the battle for the last roster spot if Denver wants to bring him in. I think that he's a good spark plug guy, and he's somebody I talked about earlier in the year. And I know that certain, majority of the people that commented and heard the episode about him did not like the idea of bringing him in, but I do think he's a good spark plug guy. I actually liked him a lot in Philly a few years ago. I liked him a lot for the Knicks last year. I don't think that he's going to be this massive pickup where a guy like Brogdon would be, or maybe a guy like D'Anthony Melton, but I think he's a good enough backup point guard that if he does come in for a guy like Bruce and, he goes off for his 10 points in, a 3-minute span and he gets everybody going, gets the crowd hyped up, I think it could be a major factor for Denver. I do apologize in advance for my breathing. The change in season, everything gets my asthma, acting up sometimes. So, but I think that he could be a good pickup for Denver, or, somebody that could attempt to battle out that last roster spot for Denver and try to make a difference when it comes to the playoff rotation. And I think, like I said, I like him. I'm fine with it as a backup. I think that there are better options out there. He's not necessarily the best option, but it is an update that I saw, the most recent, so I did want to bring it to attention. So, like I said, he's officially not going back to the Knicks, so he's officially on the market. And if Denver wants to try to bring him in, not sign him right away, let him try to compete for that last roster spot. And if he beats out guys like Moses and like Kessler, then so be it. And he's one of those guys that is coming in and is a spark for Denver, almost like what Russ was for Denver this past year. Obviously not as good though, but that whole energy that Russ had in the playoffs, if Cam Payne could come and bring that kind of energy, I'm more than happy to bring him in. Like I said, Kessler Edwards and Moses are officially the two guys right now who are on their training camp deals. In order to fill in that last Nuggets roster spot. Now, there are other names still on the market. I'm going to get into those a lot more tomorrow on tomorrow's episode, but I want to make this almost strictly about the competition for that last roster spot, because there's two guys that are on deals, and there's two guys that I think Denver wants to bring in, but I'm also it intrigues me that Denver is bringing in a power forward center combo and then another center. So I think that they're maybe just planning for not the worst with Val, but the fact that if he goes down, then you have another backup. So they're officially competing. It's going to be for this last roster spot. I'm curious to see what happens with Duran, since they want to bring in a power forward and a center, or one or the other right now, more than they are looking for a backup point guard. But I'm also interested to see what they do with their two-way guys like Curtis Jones, guys like Tamar Bates, who have the opportunity to come up when Denver needs them to play a game here and there, and actually, get rotational minutes probably at the backup point guard slot. So I'm more interested to see what happens with the guys who are currently on rosters or on two ways, rather than whatever player they decide to bring in on that final roster spot. So, but I'm very excited to see how the competition goes, because I know that there's going to be a lot of inside sources coming out with how it went at practices and who performed better. And obviously Denver's going to bring in whoever they feel is fit to fill in that last roster spot. And maybe it's a guy who makes a little bit of a difference off the bench in that bench unit. So the next thing I want to do is break down the situation and how each player is before I get into my opinion on it and end the episode. But I think that there are two differences in both players. The one thing with Kessler Edwards, you have options to put him in and still be able to space the floor. He's a guy who can play as a 4 and be a rim protector, but he could also hit threes, knock threes down. And it gives you the freedom of playing a guy like Payne Watson at the 3 if he's able to shoot. And you like I said, he's able to shoot, so it draws attention away from guys like Peyton and Bruce Brown, who are the biggest shooter or best shooters in the world. And like I said, he's a good rim protector. So when Denver runs their zone defenses, he's still somebody that could come in and play in that zone defense while also being able to be a weapon on the offensive side of the court. So he is somebody that intrigues me. Because you could also, I think I said with him, you could run a bigger lineup with a guy like Val, who's not as talented defensively, and you could still put Deron Holmes, Peyton Watson, and maybe a guy like Cam Johnson at the 1 if you want to run a super big lineup, or you could keep Jamal in there at the backup 1, maybe a guy like Strawther, maybe a guy like Bruce, because Kessler Edwards is offensively talented enough to be able to, stretch the floor and play that expand the floor as a 4 or 5, whatever he's going to be playing for Denver. The difference with Moses Brown, Moses is a rim protector. Moses is also 7'2" with a 7'5" wingspan. He's a bigger frame. I think that he would be a great fit for Denver's third string unit or playing with the second string unit. Like I've said, I got into some conversations. Denver now has the depth to sort of make it work with a guy like Moses, where you're able to play Strawther, Tim Hardaway, if Jokic is in there or whatever the case may be. You're able to play lineups like that with a guy like Moses, who's going to be a rim protector. It's not that he can't score. He's just not going to be able to expand the floor for you. So if he could still grab offensive rebounds, if he could still put the ball up, have putbacks here and there, go up for, 7, 8 rebounds if he's getting a good amount of minutes, and also have 10, 15 points, that would be massive for Denver. So I think when it comes down to the two things, the two differences is they're both rim protectors. Moses is a way bigger frame, and Kessler's a guy that could easily expand the floor way more than a guy like Moses can, because Moses can't shoot. And I know the whole thing was that his free throw is diabolical, and he's a guy that cannot shoot free throws to save his life. So my thought of it right now, and this is the last topic I have for you guys today, in my opinion, if it was up to me to bring one of the two guys in, I do like the thought of Kessler Edwards being able to shoot the ball. Personally, I'd bring in Moses. Something about having that third string center who's a guy who can make a difference when he's on the floor, whether that be for 5 minutes or 15 minutes, where it's not the biggest difference in the world, but he's able to protect the rim. He's able to, like I said, there's games where he's played 22 minutes and he's put up 11, 12, 3 steals, 2 blocks. If you have a guy like that with guys who are talented in the likes of Strawther, Tim Hardaway, Bruce, Payne Watson, Deron Holmes, I think it's great. And I also think that you bring Moses in as a backup 5, it also opens up more space for a guy like Deron Holmes to get more opportunity and be able to actually play some minutes for Denver this upcoming year, rather than bringing in another power forward and sort of restricting those minutes more than allowing him to be available. So that's all I got. Like I said, if it comes down to those two players, I think that my opinion would be Moses. But I also think that there are more players on the board for Denver to go ahead and attempt to grab still. So I'm going to get into that tomorrow, talk about 4 guys who I think Denver should look to, maybe attempt to bring in via free agency, or, to let them fight for that last contract or that last roster spot. But that's all I got for you guys. Hit that like and subscribe button. Like I said, I'm sorry about my breathing, dealing with a little bit of the change of seasons over here. And